Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Seymour, Ells, and I serve as the clerk on your DuPage UU Church Board of Trustees. We want to welcome everyone this morning to our open and inclusive virtual community. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and pledge to support one another as we explore these paths. We are so glad you were able to find us this morning and join us for our live streamed service. Please check the church website at dupageuchurch.org for updates. If you search under DuPage UU Church on Facebook, you will find a number of ways to be in community with us as well. Today, after the service at 11:30, we will have a lightly structured conversation surrounding the topic of accessibility during the pandemic. Please join us. The link is in your order of service. And now, I would like you to join us in an exercise in connection, a way to share how you are feeling, and a way to establish an awareness how others in our community are doing as well. So, we would like to invite you to pull out a mobile device and access the website shown here. It is menti.com, MENTI.com. We would like you to share a word that expresses how you feel about the pandemic now, actually. You're welcome to share several words. Ask other members of your household to share. It would be hard to share too much given the circumstances and how long we have been processing these feelings. The code is 633614. Five years ago, this church started working towards AIM certification. AIM stands for Accessibility and Inclusion Ministry. AIM's purpose is to guide congregations to better welcome, embrace, integrate, and support people with disabilities and their families in our communities. Our work is to be engaged in becoming accessible and inclusive. Our goal is to create spaces where each person can bring the fullness of their lived experience. Friends, we have been working on this process for a long, long time. Along the way, we have done some rather wonderful things that our membership identified as limiting their ability to participate. Among other things, the bathrooms were labeled so that everyone was aware that you could use the bathroom that best met your identity. Chairs with arms and larger scale benches were installed to make them more accessible to individuals with different physical needs. A hearing loop was installed in the sanctuary to allow increased access for the hearing impaired. And an accessible patio was installed outside our back door. We feel like we've done so much. Yet, we are also aware that the work is never done. AIM aspires to be a dynamic program, surveying the congregation and looking for ways we can improve participation for everyone. It has been an eye-opening year for many of us in the disability community. Our community has been told for years that finding ways to accommodate their needs is too costly, too time-consuming, too complicated, too inconvenient. Yet, when the right people were inconvenienced, society found a way to accommodate them and smooth the way. In the past year, classes have become available online, meetings are held virtually, people were allowed to work from home. In many areas, drive-through and mail-in voting became a reality. The list goes on and on. So the question is, what did we learn about access? What strategies do we adopt and keep going forward? What strategies do we need to engage in, to make sure we remain available to our members and our community as a whole, if we are truly committed to the idea of equity in participation? Doug will now light the chalice.
Oh, got it. We light this chalice for the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Please join me in saying the spoken affirmation, which will be followed by our sung affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
If you have never experienced a word cloud before, let us introduce you to your word cloud, our word cloud. In a word cloud, the words grow bigger and become more visible as more people share that word. So here we are together. We are lonely. We are anxious. We are overwhelmed and frustrated. But most of all, we are hopeful. Here we are in this together. And now, here we have some of my favorite musicians, my son, Mason Ells, and his tag mentor, Karen Campbell, singing "What a Wonderful World."
trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. Think to myself, what a wonderful world. See eyes of blue, clouds of white, right past the day, dark secret night. Think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, pretty in the sky. That's not the faces, people going by. Hey, friends shaking hands, and how do you do? They really say, I love you. Babies cry, I watch them grow. We're much more than I ever know. I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's time to gather. And we're at the end of the month, but we're still talking about imagination. So here I have a box. Have you ever heard the expression, thinking outside of the box? What does it mean? Do we imagine our brain in a box and then it comes outside of one? It means thinking in a non-conventional or different, more imaginative and creative way. To think outside the box is to look further and to try not thinking of the obvious things, but to try thinking of the things beyond them, or even other than them. That takes imagination, which is our theme this month. Our faith asks us to be questioning and imaginative. It's part of our fifth UU source. Heed the guidance of reason and the results of science. Sometimes people think of science and imagination as opposites, but every good scientist will tell you that you need imagination and reason to understand the world and how to invent new things. Scientists and inventors need to question and use their imagination. Even Albert Einstein, a physicist, used his imagination. He said, I am enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination encircles the world. So let's take this box. Let's think outside of the box and use our imaginations. What could this box be? A box for a mug? A house for a gerbil? The controls of a robot? How crazy can we get? How far can we think outside of the box? Is it a galaxy within ours? Could it be God? One way to think outside the box is to let everyone in. So I have a real-life example of someone thinking outside of the box. Austrian Paul Wittgenstein had just established his career as a pianist when he was drafted to fight in World War I. During battle, Wittgenstein lost his right arm. As he was recovering in a prisoner of war camp, he wondered how he would be able to continue his career. The traditional repertoire for pianists would likely now be inaccessible for him. Wittgenstein used out-of-the-box thinking and wrote to the accomplished composers of his day and commissioned them to write left-handed only works for him. Wittgenstein was able to continue his career as a professional pianist. These works have allowed many others with disabilities to perform, as well as inspired other composers to write piano music for the left hand. And now, Vera will perform the left-handed piece, Malgré, Tout, by Manuel Ponce.
name is Kristen Tang, and I'm a member of the Accessibility and Inclusion Ministry here at DUC. And I'm imagining you all here in front of me. From the 1991 IBM Training Manual, quote, "For people without disabilities, technology makes things easier. For people with disabilities, technology makes things possible." Now, as far as I know, the 1991 IBM Training Manual is not listed as one of the 6 sources of that Unitarian Universalist draws from for wisdom and guidance in spiritual matters. However, when I first read this quote, I did have a moment of clarity about accessibility. Accessibility is not necessarily about making something just a little bit easier for someone. It could be about making something possible for someone. Prior to the pandemic, I think for most of us, live stream services, committee meetings on Zoom, Facebook joys and concerns were convenient. They made it easier to connect on those occasions when we could not be here in person. But these things were not required to make church possible, at least not for the majority of us. But now, the church, the sanctuary, classrooms, the meeting rooms are no longer accessible for gathering in groups. Without the live stream services and hymn sing-alongs, Zoom meetings and Zoom coffee hour, pre-recorded and Zoom RE lessons, various offerings on Facebook, a virtual auction, without all the ways we have made accommodations to stay safe during the pandemic, church simply would not be possible. I would also like to point out, however, that even before the pandemic, there were people in our church community, as well as in the wider world, for whom the live stream services, Zoom meetings, and Facebook joys and concerns were actually necessary to make church possible for them. People with chronic pain or illness, those struggling with mental health issues, may not always be able to come through our doors comfortably, but technology makes it possible for them to connect from home. Likewise, when we can all be here, the elevator makes church possible for those with mobility problems, and the hearing loop in the sanctuary makes services better for many hearing aid users. When we make church in our community accessible, we benefit in at least 2 ways. First, we may find ourselves temporarily in need of elevators or live stream services in times of illness or injury. But more importantly, when our church and our communities are accessible to all, we are given the opportunity to know and cherish those who would be barred from participating without accessibility accommodations. While most of us long for life to be back to normal, it's important to point out that some people with disabilities would greatly benefit if some of the accommodations and out-of-the-box ideas put in place to make church and work and school possible during the pandemic would stay in place even after the pandemic is over. According to the ADA Network Fact Sheet, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. The purpose of the law is to make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. Signed into law a little over 30 years ago, the ADA has undoubtedly had a significant impact on improving the lives of many. However, equal rights for all with disabilities is still a long way off. For example, even before the pandemic, estimates of unemployment rates for people with all types of disabilities range from 20 to 40%, with many more underemployed or in jobs for which they are overqualified. Receiving reasonable accommodations from an employer, which for some would make doing the job possible, can be a difficult battle. From her article, How to Properly Celebrate a Civil Rights Law During a Pandemic, in which its subjects were left to die, the Americans with Disability Act, Imani Barbarin, a self-described disabled student, writer, traveler, and activist, writes, quote, "Prior to the pandemic, disabled people were told that the accessibility we needed was cost prohibited and unlikely to be implemented, only to watch, during the pandemic, as the institutions that barred our inclusion make those same tools available now that non-disabled people needed them." Imagine her frustration. Imagine the anger and sadness of many in the disability community when they are treated as less deserving to access to work and school than their abled counterparts. Of course, even with all the accommodations we've been using to make access to Sunday services and other church life possible during the pandemic, there are still some who are left out. Most aspects of church and school are currently not possible for people who don't own a computer or other device, nor for those who are without reliable internet. People with hearing loss have also struggled with accessibility during the pandemic. Sherry Eberts, founder of the blog and online community Living with Hearing Loss, spoke about her frustration with the video conferencing company Zoom while speaking on the National Public Radio program Here and Now in November of 2020. She explained that Zoom had partnered with Otter, a company that uses high-quality artificial intelligence to produce accurate captions that work well for personal communication. But closed captioning is only available for Zoom users who pay a premium Zoom service. Eberts penned an open letter asking for free closed captioning and has organized a petition asking for the same. Said Eberts, quote, "It's frustrating that people with hearing loss are expected to pay for a feature that provides them with equal access. You would never build a building and include ramps and then ask people in wheelchairs to pay to use them. And I think the same thing holds true for people with hearing loss. Closed captioning is our ramp." So when the pandemic is over, when everything is back to normal, I hope that not everything goes back to the way it was. I hope we remember what it was like going through the pandemic, when so much was suddenly inaccessible to us. I hope we remember the wisdom of disabled people and disability rights activists and the 1991 IBM training manual. I hope we remember what all of these things have taught us about accessibility. When Zoom and live streams go back to being mere conveniences for most of us, may we remember the time when these accommodations and other forms of out-of-the-box thinking made church possible. I hope we remember how we relied on them to keep our church community connected. And I further hope that we will not forget about the members of our church community and those in the wider world for whom technology and other accommodations were always and still remain a matter of making church and work and school and life out in the community possible. Thank you. And now, please join us in singing hymn number 134, Our World is One World.
Touches Well, in the Chalice Circle, we always did it in person and met with people at Brookdale Nursing Home. But now we can do it online, and that's really very good. So there's 5 of us who can do it online, and there are 2 more people who just listen on the telephone. So that's good.
I'm not great at speaking with a bunch of people in a class. I've actually been taking smaller classes because of this. And so with working online, I'm able to speak up in a class of like 20 students without having intense anxiety about it.
I think Ryan's been thriving in school. He's able to be in and out of the Zoom meetings 10 times a day, just like on a bell schedule. He is on YouTube in between us, so he doesn't have to worry about going from classroom to classroom or what class, and does he have the right books in his backpack and all that. Everything's on his desk. That's great. And with Zoom, he's also able to mute himself. So if he ends up mumbling something or something spits out of his mouth that as a reaction to something going on in the classroom, he's not heard. So in some ways, he's a better classmate.
The format to do a flipped classroom style learning experience, because, you know, since we were going to be taking all our lectures online anyway, he decided instead of just expositing, why don't I just do the slide presentations as an instructional video? Then all the questions that you have, you can ask them during the standard lecture time, and you can listen to the lecture or watch the lecture whenever you want to and at your own pace. And that was really nice, because if there was something that I needed to understand, I could immediately go and just listen, re-listen to it, or if there were parts which I was getting pretty well, I could change the recording speed. And
mostly I keep in touch online because they're not comfortable with the pandemic. And nor am I. My Al-Anon meetings figured out Zoom. Ryan's Taekwondo studio figured out Zoom. His scout troop figured out Zoom. So we've been able to do a lot through Zoom and maintain some sort of connection with the outside world.
I struggled with taking tests, just all the background noise of everyone in class, and it was very difficult for teachers to find a spot for me where it wasn't loud, because that's just how the class was. So now taking tests, you know, they can put me in a breakout room, check on me every so often, but I'm able to work quietly by myself.
one thing that I've done occasionally is, like, when there's been a slide that's covered really fast, I'll just take a screenshot of it.
But overall, other than the loss of my dad, it's been a good year for us. Things are different. We had to learn how to adapt to change. Change is hard. We don't always know, we anticipated something being a short-term thing with the COVID. Now it looks like it could be 18 months long until the vaccine is fully out there, maybe longer. So there's been a big adaptation of life and what we can do. And the capability of having technology be our friend and use it as a tool has really been helpful. But having to learn how to create new boundaries with it, when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, how much is too much, has been a lesson learned for me, and applying it as a parent.
You can be in all kinds of classrooms for both lectures and test taking. And both of those things, what the actual environment is, can have a huge impact on your ability to learn or perform. And, in colleges, they just sort of put you wherever. So this home learning environment means that I have a stable place to to both take the lectures and do the tests.
This was the first year, I'm almost positive, of high school that I have not only passed all of my classes, I have passed all of them with A's and B's. I did not expect that to happen because I'm not great at working by myself and time management, but it feels incredible to be able to do that just with a small change of, hey, you're in front of a computer screen now. So that's really cool.
Belonging to the church has given me more hope, you know, and when talking to the Chalice circle, they encourage me a lot, and I can share with them their experiences and my experiences, and it's, I would say it's very fulfilling.
Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was written as Beethoven was losing his hearing. The story goes that during the symphony's premiere performance, Beethoven had to be physically turned toward the audience so he could take in their thunderous approval. In other words, Beethoven was only able to hear his masterpiece in his imagination. And now Vera and Karen Campbell will play Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony as the offering for the support of our beloved community is given and received.
Hi, my name is Rachel Harrison, and I am a member of the AIM Task Force here at DUUC. I also work for FTD Companies in the Esplanade Park of Downers Grove as a customer care agent. And by the way, did I mention that I'm a person living with autism, which affects me in numerous ways, such as an inability to drive and difficulty functioning in various social settings. Despite the tragedy of the pandemic, ways that we have adapted to it have made it possible for me to work and do church more easily. Since I've now been working from home since March, I am more comfortable and don't have to worry about my gestures or other atypical behaviors bothering the management or my cube-mate. I can watch the live stream church services in comfortable clothes and at a time that's convenient and easier to focus, and can replay them to my heart's content. Notably, I've also enjoyed the Zoom coffee hours even more than in person. For those of you who ever participated in person, coffee hour in Creeves Hall was overstimulating for me. too loud, too crowded, and gave me too much concern about violating personal space to really enjoy it. Also, not having to take Lyft to work and church has saved me a lot of money. My hope is that even after the pandemic is over, I'll have the ability to participate in all aspects of society, work, church, anything I do on a regular basis, either fully virtually or a hybrid of in-person and virtual. This would allow me to participate in the most comfortable way possible given the nature of the activity, attitudes of others, and geographical or physical barriers. Please join me in imagining a world where these accommodations are possible for all. Let's make this truly a world for all.
I'd like to say thank you to Rachel and for everyone who provided us with their words about their experience over the past year. And now, I would like to ask you to help us again. If you could please pull out your mobile device, we'd like you to share another word with us, or a few. We would like you to tell us a word that expresses how you are feeling having experienced this service with us today. I love seeing all your words. While you continue sharing, please join us for our closing hymn, number 318, We Would Be One.
Please join us for the Zoom discussion following the service. The link is in the order of service and also in the weekly update. And now for our closing words by disability rights activist Imani Barbarin. Disabled people shouldn't have to be resilient. but I celebrate our resilience anyway. Disabled people shouldn't have to be creative to combat an inaccessible world, but I celebrate our creativity anyway. Disabled people shouldn't have to shout for equity and inclusion, but the chorus of our voices is a melody that brings me to tears in gratitude.